What you're about to see will shock you. A 6-year-old girl named Sophie walked up to her grandmother at Easter dinner, handed her a small wrapped box, and said 5 words that made the entire room go silent. What was inside that box didn't just expose years of favoritism and cruelty, it completely destroyed a family's fake perfect image in less than 60 seconds. This grandmother had been giving expensive toys, cash, and lavish gifts to every other grandchild for years, while consistently giving Sophie cheap dollar store items or nothing at all. She thought no one was keeping track. She was wrong. What Sophie's father had been secretly preparing for months, and what that little girl delivered with the confidence of someone twice her age, will make you believe that sometimes the smallest people carry the biggest truth. By the end of this story, you'll understand why this Easter Sunday became the day one family finally said, "Enough," and why sometimes the most powerful gift you can give someone is exactly what they deserve. Stay with me, because what happens next will leave you speechless. My 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, stood in the middle of Patricia's perfectly decorated dining room, wearing the lavender dress with butterfly sleeves that she had picked out specifically for Easter Sunday. Her small hands were wrapped around a gift box no bigger than her palm. Every adult in the room was busy laughing, clinking wine glasses, and discussing weekend plans, too distracted by their own conversations to notice her. Except me. I was watching every move. Sophie looked directly at her grandmother, lifted that small box with both hands, and said clearly, "Grandma, Daddy told me to give this to you if you were ever mean to me again." Everything stopped. Forks froze halfway to mouths. The soft Easter music playing in the background seemed to fade into nothing. Patricia, my husband Daniel's mother, gave a tight, confused smile, like this was some kind of adorable childhood joke. She reached for the box with the same patronizing chuckle she always used around Sophie. "What's this, sweetie?" she said, still smiling for the audience around the table. But when she opened that box, she didn't laugh. She didn't smile. She screamed. A sharp guttural sound that cut through the room, louder than any Easter hymn, louder than the gasps from the other family members, louder than the terrible silence that followed. People rushed over to see what was inside, but I already knew. Daniel had been preparing that box for months. He told me it was for the day his mother went too far. That day was today. Let me tell you how we got here, how my daughter became invisible at family gatherings while sitting right at the table, how that small box contained something so powerful it shattered every fake smile and polite pretense that had held this family together for years, and how a 6-year-old girl became the one to finally deliver the truth that none of the adults had the courage to speak. When I married Daniel 3 years ago, I thought I was joining a warm, close-knit family. They seemed to do everything together: holiday parties, weekend barbecues, birthday celebrations. Patricia was at the center of it all, the matriarch who organized every event and had an opinion about everything. I thought that was just how strong family women operated. I respected her. I genuinely wanted her approval. At first, she acted like she welcomed me. She complimented my cooking, hugged me goodbye at family events, even asked for my input on party planning. But it didn't take long before I started noticing the shift. Small things at first: forgetting to include me in family group texts, making comments about how different I was from the women in their family, subtle remarks about my parenting style or the way I dressed Sophie. But the real problem wasn't how Patricia treated me. The real problem was how she treated my daughter. And that Easter Sunday, with that tiny box and 5 simple words, Sophie was about to make sure everyone in that room finally saw exactly what I had been watching for years. The screaming had stopped, but Patricia was still staring into that box like it contained something that could destroy her. And in a way, it did. Because what Daniel had packed in there wasn't just a message. It was 3 years' worth of evidence that this grandmother had been playing favorites so blatantly so cruelly that even a 6-year-old could see it. When Daniel first introduced me to his family, I was genuinely excited. Sophie was only 3 at the time, and I thought having a big extended family would be wonderful for her. My own family was small, just my parents who lived across the country, so the idea of Sunday dinners, holiday traditions, and cousins for Sophie to grow up with felt like a dream come true. Daniel's family seemed perfect on the surface. Patricia lived in this beautiful 2-story house in one of Denver's nicest suburbs, the kind with manicured lawns and matching mailboxes. She was always hosting something: Easter brunch, 4th of July barbecues, Christmas Eve parties that looked like they belonged in magazines. She had strong opinions about everything from politics to proper table settings, but I mistook that confidence for wisdom. The first time I brought Sophie to a family gathering, Patricia made what seemed like a genuine effort. She knelt down to Sophie's level, complimented her dress, and asked about her favorite cartoons. Sophie, being 3 and naturally social, warmed up to her immediately. I remember feeling relieved, thinking, she likes Sophie. This is going to work. Daniel had 2 siblings, his sister Rachel and his brother Mark. Rachel's daughter Emma was 5 at the time, just 2 years older than Sophie, and Mark's son Lucas was 7. I imagined Sophie growing up with built-in playmates, sharing inside jokes and creating memories that would last a lifetime. The first few months went smoothly enough. Patricia would send birthday cards for Sophie, remember to ask about her preschool activities, and include her in group photos at family events. But I started noticing little inconsistencies that made my stomach tighten, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. At Lucas's 8th birthday party, Patricia had organized this elaborate treasure hunt in her backyard. She had personalized clues for each child, leading them to different stations where they'd find small prizes. Emma's clues led her to a jewelry box with a real silver bracelet inside. Lucas found a remote-controlled car at his final stop. Sophie's clue led her to a coloring book and a pack of broken crayons that looked like they'd been sitting in Patricia's junk drawer for years. Sophie didn't complain. She's always been the type of child who finds joy in small things. She thanked Patricia politely and spent the rest of the party coloring quietly while the other kids played with their new toys. But I watched Daniel's face during that moment. He noticed too, though he didn't say anything. When Christmas rolled around that first year, the differences became impossible to ignore. Patricia had this tradition of giving each grandchild a special ornament for the family tree, something personalized that represented their interests or achievements. Emma received a beautiful glass ballerina ornament because she had started taking dance classes. Lucas got a detailed sports ornament with his name engraved on a tiny football. Sophie received a generic red ball ornament from a discount store, still with the clearance sticker on it. I told myself Patricia was still getting to know Sophie, still learning her interests. I made excuses because I wanted this family to work. Sophie was happy, Daniel was happy, and I didn't want to be the new wife who caused problems over Christmas ornaments and birthday party prizes. But deep down, something was shifting inside me. I started paying closer attention to the family dynamics. I noticed how Patricia's face lit up differently when Emma and Lucas walked into a room versus when Sophie appeared. I noticed how she remembered every detail about the other grandchildren's lives: Emma's dance recitals, Lucas's baseball games, their favorite foods, their friends' names, but could never seem to recall Sophie's teacher's name or what grade she was starting in the fall. Daniel and I had conversations about it, usually late at night after Sophie was asleep. He would acknowledge that his mother seemed distracted sometimes, but he always had an explanation. She was getting older, she was busy, she had a lot on her mind with work and maintaining that big house. She's just not used to having a younger grandchild around, he would say. Give her time. So I gave her time. I gave her 3 years. And in those 3 years, I watched my daughter slowly learn that love in this family came with conditions she could never meet. By Sophie's fourth birthday, the pattern had become undeniable. What started as small oversights had evolved into a systematic exclusion that was so consistent it couldn't possibly be accidental anymore. The birthday itself was the first major red flag. Patricia always made elaborate celebrations for Emma and Lucas, themed parties with decorations, custom cakes, and guest lists that included half the neighborhood. For Emma's sixth birthday that spring, Patricia had rented a bounce house and hired a face painter. The party lasted 4 hours and ended with Emma opening presents that filled an entire corner of the living room. Sophie's fourth birthday fell on a Tuesday, and Patricia suggested we keep it simple since it was a school day. She offered to take us to dinner at a family restaurant, the kind with sticky floors and screaming toddlers. No decorations, no special cake, just a store-bought cupcake with a single candle stuck in it. When Sophie blew out her candle and made her wish, Patricia was checking her phone. But it was the gift that really showed me who we were dealing with. Patricia handed Sophie a small bag with a plastic toy princess from the dollar store, the kind where the paint chips off if you look at it wrong. The same week, I had seen her give Emma a $50 gift card, just because it was Tuesday. I started keeping a mental inventory of every slight, every forgotten moment, every time Sophie was treated as an afterthought. At Easter egg hunts, Patricia would fill Emma and Lucas's eggs with cash and expensive candies, while Sophie's contained generic jelly beans and plastic trinkets. During family photo sessions, Patricia would position Emma and Lucas front and center, while Sophie was consistently placed on the edges or partially hidden behind other family members. The Christmas when Sophie turned 5 was the breaking point for me, though I still didn't say anything. Patricia had this tradition of taking each grandchild shopping individually for their holiday outfit, a special one-on-one bonding experience that the kids looked forward to all year. Emma came home with a $200 velvet dress and matching shoes. Lucas got a full suit that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. When it was Sophie's turn, Patricia took her to Target and let her pick out a $15 dress from the clearance rack. Sophie was thrilled because she didn't know any better, but I felt sick watching my daughter's excitement over something that represented such obvious inequality. The gift exchange that Christmas was even worse. Emma received an American Girl doll with an entire wardrobe and accessories, easily $300 worth of toys. Lucas got a new tablet and gaming system. Sophie opened her gift to find a used puzzle with 2 pieces missing and a book that had clearly been read by someone else first, with crayon marks on several pages. I watched Sophie's face carefully during these moments. She never complained, never asked why her gifts were different, never showed anything but genuine gratitude. But I started noticing subtler changes in her behavior. She stopped running to hug Patricia when we arrived at family events. She began sitting closer to me during gatherings, as if she needed the reassurance of my presence. She started asking questions that broke my heart. Mommy, why doesn't Grandma Patricia remember my favorite color? And do you think I'm not as good as Emma? Daniel and I fought about it more frequently. Not screaming matches, but those exhausting late-night conversations where I would list example after example while he would rationalize each one away. He would say I was being too sensitive, that his mother was just set in her ways, that Sophie seemed happy enough. So why rock the boat? What boat? I finally asked him one night. Sophie isn't even allowed on the boat. That's when he went quiet. That's when I saw something shift in his expression, like he was finally seeing what I'd been pointing out for 2 years. But even then, he wasn't ready to confront his mother. He was still hoping things would change naturally, that Patricia would eventually warm up to Sophie the way she doted on Emma and Lucas. I was done hoping. I was done making excuses. And I was especially done watching my daughter accept crumbs while other children feasted. I just didn't know that Daniel had been done for a while too. The moment everything changed happened 3 weeks before that Easter Sunday. It was Lucas's 10th birthday party, and Patricia had outdone herself. She'd rented the community center, hired a DJ, and decorated the entire space with a superhero theme complete with life-sized cardboard cutouts and a professional photographer to capture every moment. Sophie, now 6, was genuinely excited about the party. She'd been talking about it for weeks, practicing the happy birthday song, and had even used her own allowance money to buy Lucas a small Lego set. She wore her favorite purple dress, the one with sparkles that she saved for special occasions, and carried Lucas's gift like it was made of gold. When we arrived, Patricia was in full hostess mode, greeting everyone with elaborate hugs and making sure every detail was perfect. She swept Lucas up in her arms, told him he looked handsome in his new outfit, and immediately started introducing him to the photographer as my brilliant grandson, the birthday boy. Emma received similar treatment. Patricia complimented her dress, her hairstyle, and made sure she was positioned prominently in the first round of photos. Then Patricia's eyes landed on Sophie, and I watched her entire demeanor shift. No hug, no compliment, just a distracted, "Hi, sweetie," before she immediately turned back to organizing the other children. The party activities were elaborate and expensive. Patricia had hired entertainers to do magic tricks and face painting. She'd set up different stations around the room, a craft table, a game area, and a special VIP section where Lucas could open his mountain of presents. Each activity was designed to make Lucas feel like the center of the universe, and it was working. The kid was having the time of his life. But I noticed something that made my blood boil. When it came time for the craft activity, Patricia had prepared special art kits for each child. Emma and the other kids received deluxe sets with quality markers, stickers, glitter, and thick cardstock paper. Sophie was handed a basic coloring book and a box of broken crayons. Literally the same cheap supplies I'd seen at that birthday party 3 years earlier. Sophie didn't complain. She never did. She sat quietly at the edge of the craft table, carefully coloring inside the lines with her damaged crayons, while the other children created elaborate masterpieces with their premium supplies. When Emma asked if she could borrow some of Sophie's crayons, Sophie immediately shared what little she had, even though her own materials were clearly inferior. That's when I saw Daniel's face change. He was standing across the room, but I could see him watching the craft table with an expression I'd never seen before. His jaw was tight, his hands were clenched at his sides, and for the first time in 3 years, he looked genuinely angry. But the breaking point came during present opening. Patricia had arranged Lucas's gifts in a spectacular display. Boxes wrapped in expensive paper, gift bags with elaborate ribbons, and envelopes that clearly contained cash or gift cards. She announced each gift with fanfare, reading the cards aloud and making sure everyone applauded appropriately. When it was Sophie's turn to give Lucas his gift, she walked up proudly with her small wrapped box. Patricia barely glanced at it as she set it aside with the other presents. But when Lucas opened it later, Patricia's reaction was unmistakable. She looked at the modest Lego set, then at Sophie, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Oh, how thoughtful. Lucas has so many toys already, but I'm sure he'll find somewhere to put this." The dismissal in her voice was crushing. Sophie's face fell slightly, but she still managed to tell Lucas she hoped he liked it. Lucas, to his credit, was genuinely excited about the gift and thanked Sophie sweetly. But the damage was done. On the drive home, Sophie was unusually quiet. Finally, she asked, "Mommy, did I pick a bad present for Lucas?" That night, after Sophie was asleep, Daniel sat down at the kitchen table with a pen and paper. I found him there an hour later, writing something with intense concentration. "What are you doing?" I asked. He looked up at me with eyes that held 3 years' worth of suppressed frustration. "I'm writing a letter," he said, "and I'm going to give Sophie a choice." 3 weeks later, we were back at Patricia's house for Easter Sunday. The dining room looked like something out of a home decorating magazine. pastel flowers everywhere, elegant place settings with real china, and a centerpiece that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Patricia had spent days preparing, and she wanted everyone to know it. Sophie walked in, wearing that lavender dress with butterfly sleeves, carrying the small box Daniel had given her that morning. She'd been unusually calm about it, like she understood the weight of what she was carrying but wasn't afraid. When I asked if she was sure she wanted to do this, she'd nodded with a certainty that surprised me. "Daddy said I get to choose when I'm ready," she told me. "I'm ready now." The early part of dinner went exactly as I expected. Patricia fussed over Emma and Lucas, complimenting their outfits and asking detailed questions about school, friends, and upcoming activities. She remembered that Lucas had a science fair project due and that Emma had been accepted into an advanced art program. She asked follow-up questions, laughed at their stories, and made sure they felt like the most important people in the room. When she turned to Sophie, her tone shifted to that polite but distant voice I'd grown to hate. "And how are you doing, sweetie? Still enjoying school?" Sophie answered politely, but Patricia was already looking away, scanning the table to make sure everyone had enough food. She didn't ask about Sophie's reading progress, her new friendship with a girl named Chloe, or the fact that she'd been chosen to help the teacher with special projects. She didn't know about any of it because she'd never bothered to ask. After dinner, Patricia announced it was time for Easter gifts. She'd arranged them on the side table like a display, beautifully wrapped packages in pastel colors with elaborate bows. This was always her favorite part of family gatherings, the moment where she got to play the generous grandmother while everyone watched and praised her thoughtfulness. Lucas went first. Patricia handed him a large box with ceremony, announcing that she'd noticed he was getting interested in photography. Inside was a real digital camera, not a toy, but an actual piece of equipment that probably cost several $100s. The family applauded while Lucas hugged Patricia and thanked her enthusiastically. Emma was next. Her gift was an art easel with a complete set of professional-grade supplies: paints, brushes, canvases, everything an aspiring artist could want. Patricia explained that she'd spoken with Emma's art teacher and wanted to support her talent. Another round of applause, another grateful hug. Then Patricia turned to Sophie. The shift in her energy was obvious to anyone paying attention. Where she'd been animated and excited with the other children, now she seemed to be going through the motions. "And this is for you, Sophie," she said, handing over a small gift bag without the fanfare the others had received. Sophie opened it carefully. Inside was a cheap plastic tea set, the kind you find in the clearance aisle at discount stores. The pieces were already slightly warped, and one of the cups had a small crack in it. There was no explanation about why Patricia had chosen it, no mention of Sophie's interests or talents. It was clearly something she'd grabbed last minute, if she'd even bought it herself. Sophie looked at the tea set, then at Patricia. "Thank you, Grandma," she said politely. But then she stood up, reached into her pocket, and pulled out the small box Daniel had prepared. The room went quiet as she walked around the table to where Patricia sat. Every adult conversation stopped. Even the younger cousins sensed something significant was happening. Sophie placed the box directly in front of Patricia with both hands, looked her straight in the eyes, and said clearly, "Grandma, Daddy told me to give this to you if you were ever mean to me again." Patricia's face went through several expressions: confusion, forced amusement, then growing concern as she realized this wasn't a normal childhood gesture. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the box. "What's this, sweetie?" she asked, but her voice had lost its confident edge. She opened the box, and that's when everything exploded. The scream that came out of Patricia's mouth was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It was primal, desperate, the sound of someone whose carefully constructed facade had just been demolished in front of an audience. She dropped the box like it was on fire, and its contents scattered across her perfect Easter table. The first thing that fell out was a photo. Sophie and Daniel from the day he officially adopted her 2 years ago. They were both grinning at the camera, Sophie wearing a Daddy's Girl t-shirt that Daniel had bought for the occasion. Written across the bottom in Daniel's handwriting were the words, "Official father and daughter, April 15th, 2023. But that wasn't what made Patricia scream. It was the legal document underneath. Sophie's adoption certificate, with Daniel's name clearly listed as her legal father. Patricia had somehow convinced herself that Daniel was just playing house with me and Sophie, that this wasn't a real family, that Sophie would eventually fade out of their lives. The letter that fell out last was 3 pages long, written in Daniel's careful handwriting. As Patricia's shaking hands unfolded it, I could see her face growing paler with each line. I knew what it said because Daniel had read it to me the night he wrote it. "Mom," it began, "if you're reading this, it means you've hurt my daughter again. Not my stepdaughter, my daughter. The little girl I chose to love, chose to adopt, and chose to protect. The same little girl you've spent 3 years treating like a burden instead of a blessing." The letter went on to detail every slight, every forgotten birthday, every discount store gift, while Emma and Lucas received expensive presents. It mentioned the broken crayons at craft time, the clearance rack Easter dress, the way Patricia consistently positioned Sophie out of family photos. Daniel had been paying attention to everything, documenting it all. "You have one grandchild who colors with broken crayons, while the others get deluxe art supplies," he'd written. "You have one grandchild who gets used puzzles while the others get new tablets. You have one grandchild whose birthday you treat like an inconvenience, while the others get parties that cost more than most people's rent." The final paragraph was the one that made Patricia start crying. Not the gentle tears of someone who felt sorry, but the ugly, desperate crying of someone who knew they'd been caught. "If Sophie had to give you this box, it means you've shown your true colors one too many times. From this moment forward, you are no longer welcome in our home. Sophie will no longer be subjected to your conditional love and deliberate cruelty. You can have a relationship with us when you can treat all your grandchildren with equal respect and genuine affection. Until then, we're done." Patricia looked around the table desperately, searching for someone to take her side, someone to tell her this was all a misunderstanding. Rachel looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Mark was studying his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. The other family members who'd witnessed 3 years of Patricia's favoritism suddenly found their wine glasses very interesting. "Daniel," Patricia finally choked out, "you can't be serious. Over a child who isn't even—" "Stop." Daniel's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. Sophie is my daughter in every way that matters. I chose her, I adopted her, and I will protect her from anyone who tries to make her feel small, including you." Patricia turned to me, probably expecting me to be the reasonable one, to smooth things over like I'd been doing for years. Instead, I stood up and helped Sophie put on her cardigan. "We're leaving," I said calmly. "Sophie, say goodbye to your cousins." Sophie hugged Emma and Lucas, both of whom seemed confused by the adult drama, but genuinely sad to see her go. Emma whispered something in Sophie's ear that made her smile, the first genuine smile she'd had in that house all day. As we walked to the door, Patricia called after us, her voice high and desperate. "You're making a mistake. You're destroying this family." Daniel turned around one last time. "No, Mom. I'm protecting it." We drove home in peaceful silence, Sophie humming quietly in the back seat. The days following that Easter Sunday were surprisingly peaceful. I had expected angry phone calls, guilt trips, maybe even Patricia showing up at our door with tears and apologies. Instead, there was just silence. Complete, blessed silence. Sophie adjusted faster than I thought possible. The very next day, She asked if we could invite her friend Chloe over to play with the plastic tea set Patricia had given her. When Chloe arrived, Sophie announced proudly, "My daddy says I don't have to pretend to like gifts that weren't picked with love anymore, but this one's perfect for playing pretend restaurant." Watching her play that afternoon, I realized something profound had shifted in my daughter. She wasn't walking on eggshells anymore, constantly trying to earn approval that would never come. She was just being 6 years old, silly, creative, confident in her place in our family. A week later, something beautiful happened. Emma called our house. She'd gotten our number from her mom and asked if she could talk to Sophie. Apparently, she'd been thinking about Easter dinner and wanted to understand what had happened. In the innocent way that children process complex situations, she told Sophie, "I think Grandma forgot that families are supposed to love everyone the same amount." Emma started calling regularly after that. Without Patricia orchestrating their interactions, the two girls developed a genuine friendship. Emma even convinced her mom Rachel to arrange playdates, and for the first time, Sophie had a cousin relationship that felt real and equal. Daniel changed too. The guilt that had been weighing him down for years was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence I'd never seen before. He started new traditions with Sophie: Saturday morning pancake dates, bedtime stories where she got to pick every single book, and art projects where they made gifts for each other using whatever supplies they wanted. One evening, about a month later, I found him sitting on Sophie's bed after she'd fallen asleep, just watching her breathe. When he noticed me in the doorway, he said, "I keep thinking about all the times I should have spoken up sooner." "You spoke up when she needed you to," I told him. "You gave her the power to advocate for herself. That's going to serve her for the rest of her life." And it's true. Sophie learned something that Easter Sunday that many adults never master: that she has the right to expect respect, that love shouldn't come with conditions, and that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. We started getting updates about Patricia through Daniel's siblings. Apparently, she spent weeks telling anyone who would listen that we had overreacted and that she'd been perfectly fair to all her grandchildren. But when Rachel and Mark compared notes, they started noticing patterns they'd been ignoring for years. They realized they'd been complicit in Patricia's favoritism by staying silent. The family dynamic shifted permanently. Some relatives took Patricia's side, choosing to believe her version of events rather than confront uncomfortable truths. Others reached out to us privately, admitting they'd noticed the differential treatment, but hadn't known how to address it. 6 months later, we received an unexpected envelope in the mail. Inside was a card from Patricia. Not an apology, but a birthday card for Sophie with a $20 gift card tucked inside. There was no personal message, no acknowledgement of what had happened, just her signature and the printed birthday greeting. Sophie looked at it and asked, "Do I have to write a thank you note?" "That's up to you," Daniel told her. She thought about it for a moment, then handed the card back to me. "I think Grandma Patricia still doesn't understand," she said. "Maybe when I'm older, she'll figure out how to love me the right way." That's when I knew we'd done the right thing. Sophie wasn't angry or bitter. She understood that Patricia's inability to love her fully was Patricia's limitation, not her worth as a person. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever watched a child accept less than they deserved, or if you've had to make the difficult choice between keeping peace and protecting someone you love, know that you're not alone. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to enable unkindness. Leave a comment below and share your own story. Subscribe for more real-life moments that remind us all that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when it matters most.